Louise, great to see you. Thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat.
Yeah, great to be here, Paul.
Great, it's great to see you. And I always know that CEOs are busy, so I always appreciate you making the effort. So I'm going to ask about what you're doing to start with. So you provide people with personalized air quality data. Why is that so important to people? I mean, I get the point about good quality air, but why personalized air quality data? I mean, just tell us a bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so we talk about how people like to get personalized data on all sorts of things. So you've got people tracking heart rates, you've got people understanding the impact of what they eat on them. People look at their sleep and understand good nights and bad nights and how to improve their sleep. But the one thing that people don't tend to do at a personal level is the air that they breathe, which is almost the most obvious thing in a way, the thing
Pretty
that
important.
keeps us all alive. So we're essentially trying to fill that gap, and we also feel that there's within the world of air quality, there's a feeling that people might look at a map and think of air quality across a city, but then that kind of takes it away from the individual. So as a result, it makes it something that's separate to them. And we're really trying to get at the point that, air pollution is the place where it matters is where you or your loved ones or vulnerable people are breathing it in. That's
Yeah.
why air pollution matters. So we want to
So I get
move it from that sort of environmental to a personal
Yeah,
and a
I
health
get that. Now that
perspective.
you've explained that, I mean, I get that. I mean, that's an odd career move. How did you get, I mean, what got you onto that journey?
Yeah, well, Paul, you said people can talk forever. I won't go too far back to day naught, but yeah, there is a bit of a story behind that. So I think probably about 8 years ago now, I started getting involved in air pollution campaigning outside my older daughter's primary school. She's no longer there, but back in the day, and we were looking at closing the road at drop off and pick up time as part of the School Streets Initiative. And so I really got into that from the perspective of the impact on children. But also I started to look at the data and think, so we were given this handheld monitor by the council to supposedly show how the air pollution varied from when you have the school street in place compared to when you didn't have it in place. And my sort of mathematical and statistical background told me that there was no way that the data was, whatever
No.
numbers came out, there was no way that the data was actually going to tell you that story. So I got, I mean, it was a useful comms device to get people talking and get people interested, but it wasn't really good data. So I got more and more interested in what can you do with the data? Where does it come from? What level of granularity can you get it? Hourly data to what resolution across a location, how good quality is the data and what's possible to do with it. So I got more and more involved in that through the Breathe London community programme, which is run out of Imperial College. And just the more I looked into it and the health impacts, the more I thought this is crazy that there's this stuff out there, which is the second biggest risk to health worldwide, and we're just not understanding it at a personal level. So this was all kind of me outside of work trying to figure out whether there was something that I could do as a bit of a different career track. And so after probably 5 years sort of delving into it, I decided to leave my job, and the rest is history in terms of Airware Labs.
Okay. So you've outlined the problem and you've outlined how you kind of got involved with the problem.
Mm.
Tell us how you're going to fix it. I mean, I take the point about moving from general data to kind of customized, personalized data. I mean, how are you going to I mean, if I'm concerned about my air quality, I mean, how are you going to fix it for me? How are you going to help me with that? I mean, just talk us through the kind of practicalities of what you're doing.
Yeah. So I guess there's two sort of main ways in which you can engage on air quality. One is reducing the pollution in general, whether
Yeah.
that's through choice of transport, or perhaps, pushing for policy changes that have an impact on industry, whatever it might be, trying to reduce the levels of air pollution across the board. And then the other way you can look at it is what's the impact on me and my family and the people around me. So we're really coming at it on the second point. There's obviously lots of people doing the first point, and it is incredibly important doing that sort of policy and industry level. But we are looking at it from the impact on the individual, which is where we think there's the
And,
massive gap.
and just
Um,
on that specific point, I mean, how do you personalize the data? I mean, how do you do that?
yeah,
I mean, I know
so
you can't share commercial secrets, but how does I mean, just give us an idea of how that works.
Yeah, so we take we use a hyperlocal air pollution model. So we bring in lots of different data sources into
Right.
that. We build from Google has an air quality model, and we're very sort of brought into the Google ecosystem. And yeah, so we start with the Google model, and then on top of that, we add all sorts of local characteristics and data sets to make it more hyperlocal to a person's individual location. But then I would say the thing that we're really doing, which I don't think many others out there are doing, is then linking it to your breathing rate. So if you're still, it's likely that you'll be breathing much less. If you're moving, your actual dosage, so to speak, of air pollution is going to be a lot higher. So we help it like attach the air pollution data at a different location, but also based on your activity. So that's kind of the second layer that we do. And then thirdly, and this is something that we're only starting to get into, but it's very much an aim, is to then link it to your own personal vulnerabilities. If you've got a particular condition, or it might be related to your age, the sort of risk tolerance, if you like, of how much you want to be exposed to air pollution on a day-to-day basis might vary. So
Right.
so we want to bring in more of that as well as we go
And,
along, working with like respiratory clinicians and so on.
yeah, and I get that because those are quite significant issues, aren't they? But in terms of the ordinary bod, like somebody like me, I mean, how would it help me, for example, if I wanted to take the kids to the park or if I wanted to go for a bike ride or something? I mean, at that very practical level, what sort of impact can you have?
Yeah, so we offer cleaner route recommendations. So bike rides are actually quite a good one for that
Right.
because you are out in the air for a long time. There are going to be route choices that you can make, and this is one of the things that users most ask us for is, can you help me to find a cleaner route? So that's one thing that we offer. So far, it's been on the basis of we look at your habitual routes and then we help you to optimize those routes.
Right.
But we're also now looking at like upfront planning. So, I'm here, I want to go there. What's the best route for me, and what would be the differences in air pollution exposure by those choices? So that's the first one. And we look at the data of what's possible. In some cases, we can get a 50% reduction in exposure to pollution, but quite often, like a 20%
And that's still
reduction is
extraordinary. I mean,
quite
20% reduction
feasible.
is still pretty impressive, isn't it? I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean, I still go around the city and I see, people bombing it along Brixton Road
yeah,
behind a bus. And I think there is so much better, there are so many
yeah,
better options out there, and they don't have to take you any longer. It's just a case of understanding, what do these different options mean for me?
yeah.
And then the second one where you can get a even bigger variation is if you have a choice over the time that you go out on your activity. So in the morning, typically the pollution will just start to build up kind of 7:30 up till 9 and then gradually start to dissipate after the rush. But yeah, if you've got a choice over when you do the activity, and we also often offer predictions, so you can see over the next 4 days pollution's going up. I better do something about it if I've got my marathon training run this week, I better get on with it. Or, it's going down, so why don't I wait till Sunday and do that thing?
And is it
So.
is it just pollution, or does it cover things like pollen counts and those sorts of things that affect?
Yeah, we brought out pollen just about a month ago,
Right.
actually, because we could see a lot of people in Northern Hemisphere were suffering with that change of season. So yeah, it also brings out pollen data. But the two things do interact as well, because there's this kind of phenomenon of the pollen counts are actually lower in the city, but the hay fever counts are higher. And basically,
Right.
that's because the pollution makes the pollen more sticky and more
Right.
aggravating in your airways. So it actually makes, any level of pollen typically harder for
Yeah.
people to deal
Okay.
with.
And let me ask you about customers. I mean, I can see, for example, my sister, who, I mean, she's no longer with us, unfortunately, but she had terrible asthma. I
Mm.
mean, tell me about the sort of customers. So I can see why she'd want to use something like this. I mean, tell us what sort of customers you get. I mean, obviously there are people like my sister who perhaps got asthma and are
Mm.
particularly concerned about air quality. What other sorts of customers are interested in this?
Yeah, so right from the start, we've kind of had three main segments, which are kind of health conscious. We call them athletes because I don't know that they'd necessarily all call themselves athletes, but people who go out for reasonably regular runs and cycles and generally keep themselves active. That's one segment. The second one is people with specific health conditions that mean that they're more susceptible to the impacts of air pollution, and of course, there's overlaps between those groups as well.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, parents, because if we hear regularly about, the concern people, growing up in their 20s or whatever in the city thinking, oh, well, pollution's not going to affect me, but then suddenly having children and thinking, oh, actually, I don't like this
Yeah.
very much. So, they've been our three main segments from the start. I would say, in terms of what actually lands with people at the moment, we're seeing much more uptake from the first group, basically. So people who are, you know, tracking data on smartwatches, tracking, their
Yeah. So they've
PBs,
got the kit.
whatever it might be. It's that
Yeah.
group who are doing everything but, tracking their air pollution exposure.
Yes. I mean, and let me ask you about people like politicians. I mean, one would assume that politicians would want to make the effort to kind of reduce air quality or improve air quality around schools and hospitals and all
Mm.
that kind of stuff. I mean, are you getting a lot of help from the kind of the world of politics? I mean, presumably the Green Party and people like that would be interested in this. Is there an element to that?
Yeah, I mean, most cities, yeah, will have, especially in the UK, but also globally, will have some sort of policy and set of
Yeah.
initiatives that are around improving air pollution, which could be to do with, traffic, it could be to do with industry. In some countries, it's around, limiting the impacts of crop burning. It could even relate to wildfires in some
Wow.
cases. So there will be something that's going on. I think this is a very general kind of criticism, if you like, not a criticism of any particular city, but often it stops at, we will put up some monitors around the city, obviously look at the data and then, use that for policy decisions. That's perfectly reasonable thing to do. But it really falls short of understanding the impact of that on individuals' health. And, we see from lots of data collected by academics and by people like Mums for Lungs and so on, that like the hospital admissions start to
So,
spike,
so our
when
health,
there's a
are the kind
higher
of
air
health
pollution level.
authorities, are the kind of
So
health
sorry.
authorities interested?
Yeah, so definitely. But I think certainly with NHS for us, it's a case of budgets.
Mhm.
So yes, very, very interested, very cognizant that it all relates and it has, yeah, this kind of impact on the population health and, either over long term in terms of like the likelihood of dementias and heart conditions and so on, but also short term spikes in A&E admissions when the pollution gets higher. So definitely recognition, but I think there is still a struggle of like
Yeah,
figuring out what to do about it.
yeah.
But I
And
would, I just, yeah, just to finish that sort of link back to what we're doing. So we, from our discussions with doctors about this, one of the reasons it is a budget reason, but another reason is that they feel like what can they do? What can they tell their patients?
mm,
Because there is this feeling that, well, the air pollution is the same across the city day in, day out. And what we're saying is, no, it's not. It varies
mm,
massively. People don't realize how much it varies. So there are ways of protecting your health outdoors and indoors through the kinds of products
yeah,
that we're bringing.
yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting point, that, isn't it? Because you're telling people it's not all the same everywhere.
Yeah,
Pollution
exactly.
is much more variable than that, which is a really important point, I think, because when people realise that they could then do something about it, you might get some action.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point there. Let me ask you about then. I mean, you mentioned long term.
Mhm.
What does success look like to you in the medium to long term? I mean, where you going with this?
Yeah, I mean, we really want it to be we where we want to land it is in this, as I said at the beginning, this world of personal health. You know, what are the metrics that you track to understand, what's working for you, what isn't working, what you can change, how to increase your chances of living a long and healthy life. We want to see air pollution data as being just a completely natural part of that whole discussion.
Right.
And again, I think theoretically, a lot of people recognize and understand that. You know, there's not a sort of massive kind of debate about whether that's important. But again, I think people think, well, I'm not going to carry around an air pollution monitor with me every day, or if I do, I wouldn't really know what to do with the data anyway. It doesn't, all it tells me is about like the situation I'm in, and it doesn't give me any advice about the future. So we're really trying to break all of that down with just have like this digital product that gives you predictions that can integrate into Strava, Garmin, Apple Health, you name it, can integrate into lots of different platforms. So yeah, that's how we're trying to disrupt and make it relevant for people.
And to come back to your point about the data, I mean, to what extent are you using AI as part of how you manipulate or analyze, manage whatever language you want to use the data? Because I mean, presumably there's vast quantities of data once you start collecting it. I
Yeah,
mean, are you
yeah,
using AI? I
exactly.
mean, what role does AI play in helping you understand what all that stuff means?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely lots. So we use lots of different machine learning techniques to get
Right.
to the hyperlocal modeling that we do in the first place. So that's kind of our sort of deep version of using AI. We then also do use it like many companies do as more of a wrapper. So we take the complex as you said, like gazillions of data points that you could present to somebody, but how do you actually present that in a way that helps them translate that scientific stuff into insight? So we use linking up to large language model to translate that into something that people can then act on in more sort of natural language rather than lots of numbers, because users tell us, to stop putting numbers in front of me, basically. They just want to get the insight. So we use AI in that way as well. And then I think thirdly, and this is more of an aspiration, but we would want to be using AI to get the insights into the link between air pollution exposure and health at a personal level. So, like we've started to look at the correlations between heart rate variability and air pollution exposure, for example. But we'd want to build all of that up as well using AI and other kind of
Presumably, the
statistical
more of
techniques.
this data you collect and the more insight you've got into people's personal situations, the more you can start to work out what's in fact impacting on what, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, actually, I should maybe it's always nice to think in threes, but there's probably a fourth category as well, which is
Right.
which is the behavior side of things. So, to what it's like anything, tell people to drink less, tell people to eat more health, and of course, to some extent, people will do it, but they won't always do it in all situations. And what actually makes people more likely or less likely
And
to
what do you
follow
think
those
those?
kind of things.
And
So.
what do you think those things that? What do you think the things are that will trigger that behaviour change in relation to air quality? I mean, what do you think those things might be?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we're still really learning about it. I mean, in
Mm.
terms of like kind of company ethos, we don't go out sort of, we're not like your cigarette packet with your, horrible pictures of what might happen. We're not doing the scare tactics. Even though, arguably the level of, even in the UK, we talk about 40,000 deaths per year as a result of air pollution exposure. So you could tell a scare story, but that's not the way that we want to go. We are trying to be more, empowering, just like you try and take control of as much as you can in your life. This is how, best to understand your pollution exposure and the actions you can take in the face of that. So we try and do that more empowering side. I don't think we know at the moment whether that works, but we're actually linking up with some three different researchers at UCL at the moment who are looking at this question. They're specifically behavior change researchers rather than air pollution researchers or health researchers or whatever. They are behavior change
Yeah.
researchers, and they're helping us look at this problem, doing quite a bit of research on that right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, I love to see a bit of ambition, and I think you've probably bitten off quite a big piece to be working on there. Given the size of the issue, I mean, air's everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, that'll be interesting, and of course, loads of opportunities not just to work in the UK, but to work globally.
yeah.
And let me ask you about some of those issues. So to come back to the point about global peace, I mean, air and the way we perceive air and behave, it will be different culturally. It will be different in somewhere like India compared to
Mm.
London, compared to Singapore. I mean, I mean, do you have a feel for how different cultures respond to this issue? I mean, the debate, I think, in places like London is very much about functionality. We want purer air.
Mm.
Is that all there is to it?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. Probably, I'm sure the PhD could be written on this. So I'm not,
Probably.
I'm not sure I have, as quite deep thoughts as I might do. But I mean, one thing is definitely like that we do see from users in different places is like what's the context that you're working in. So,
Yeah.
um, so for example, we have couple of our team members on the software side are based in the Philippines.
Right.
Um, and when we were, and obviously they're deeply involved in building our product, and we were working on a feature that basically estimates and then sort of checks what type of transport you're in or on, or are you running, are you cycling, are you in a
Yeah. Yeah.
bus, are you
Yeah.
in a car, and then as a result of that, sort of segments your day into those things, and then attaches an air pollution exposure set of data to it, so that you can see 24 hours, where your biggest risks are and so on. Anyway, we kind of pinned down the different modes of transport we thought we were going to offer as part of this, and then our people in the Philippines said, "Yeah, but most people around here go on motorbikes, and you haven't even put you haven't even put a
Well,
motorbike
what
on."
does that
So
tell you?
we're
Yeah.
like, "Well,
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
we're in London. We think buses and tubes and whatever,
Yeah.
and of
Yeah.
course you're thinking motorbikes." And yeah, I mean, it obviously varies in different places in the Middle East. Huge issues with air pollution, but there's kind of not much point, telling people here's a clean or relatively clean cycle route, because like the levels of cycling are, very, very low. So we have to think about it in the context that they're operating in, a lot
Yeah.
more,
Yeah. And of course,
indoors compared to outdoors.
those contexts are very different, aren't they? Different. I mean, I've
Yeah,
got friends in Dubai, for example, that seem to go from an air-conditioned car to an air-conditioned office and back home to an air-conditioned house because of the
exactly. Yeah,
heat.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
presumably the quality of the air is actually reasonably good, one would assume.
Yeah, I mean, if they're lucky enough to be, yeah, in that kind of environment every day, then most likely yeah, they are sort of managing to reduce their exposure. So yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, so I'd say it's things like that. Your sort of deeper question about how do people interact with the air? I think I'm going to have to ponder that. I mean, I know people who will have who will have been thinking about it, but yeah, interesting philosophical point.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of coming at it from the point of view of a mountaineer. I mean, one of the things I always used to enjoy, standing
Mm,
on top of a mountain somewhere, was the fresh breeze.
mm,
It was always kind of part of getting to the top. There's usually, I mean, not always, but there's usually a breeze. It's usually pretty chilly. It usually felt pretty good, and
yeah,
and and I feel, I mean, it's a personal thing. I always feel good when there's a little bit of a breeze. Now,
yeah.
I don't actually know whether the quality of the air is any better or not, but it feels good, and I feel positive about that. That was kind of what was behind my
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
whether.
it's like, yeah, it's likely to be like, would obviously want to look at the data in that place at that time, but it's likely to be better. And actually, there was a nice story that came out from King's College this week about them having an A&E ward up on their
Yeah, I saw that on the
roof of their
roof. Yeah, I mean, how
building,
cool is
which
that?
was nice. So it's not, I can't imagine, yeah, it's quite as clean as the top of a mountain, but there are like very good reasons for, and it's interesting that it's obviously it's an environmental choice essentially
Yeah.
to then help with rehab and,
Yeah.
health in general of their patients. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's an odd one. I mean, it's interesting I mean, I noticed that on the news as well. And one of the things I used to enjoy about mountaineering is sleeping outdoors.
Mm,
Actually, I mean, sometimes in a tent, sometimes in a bivy bag, but sleeping under the stars.
yeah.
And it's lovely. I mean, not everyone thinks it's lovely, but I always used to really enjoy it. And it's very
Yeah.
interesting that people think that. I mean, presumably they are assuming that that will have a positive impact on the recovery of those patients. So there must be something to it.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I haven't looked into it in depth, but I mean, they mentioned in the article, get out into clean air, which sadly does say something about how, air within hospitals is maybe not
Yeah.
that great, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, taking the right steps for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you about the way you're building this organization, this business. So,
Mm,
what does it mean to you to be a decision maker in the age of AI? I mean,
mm,
the world has changed in the last few years, I think. What does it mean to you to to be leading a business in and the age of AI, for want of a better way of describing it?
mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there is a bit of the kind of cognitive load of like we could do so many things with
Yeah.
AI,
Yeah.
and we can decide one thing today, deliver it, decide another thing tomorrow, deliver it, decide, and there is a bit of like, yes, but is that in line with our company values? Is it in line with our overall strategy? Have we understood whether users are going to like it or not? Have we been through some feedback loops? All of that, which doesn't quite factor into that speed. So I think there is a bit of that. Um, I think there's obviously a risk of unintended consequences and
Mm.
sort of black box problems of you don't really know what you're shipping out there, which is always the case. The sort of unintended consequences of all sorts of technology, but I think it's heightened with this at the moment. And in our case, just I guess we are offering like automated sort of pieces of insights and advice to people, which are automatically generated because otherwise we wouldn't be able to do
And
it at
presumably you
scale.
can't get that from
um
anywhere else, presumably.
but then, yeah, there might be one or two occasions here or there where we're offering advice that clearly in the real world context, we've sent them on a route that doesn't make sense or doesn't
Mm.
exist or whatever. So there's always some of that, but I guess users are also understanding, where this is coming from and what they,
I mean,
the
what was behind
trust
my
they place in
question
it.
was really about the rate of change. I mean,
Mm,
being a CEO when I started out was still a tough job, but it didn't have, I mean, things are just moving so quickly. I mean, every 5 minutes, I don't I mean, I was talking to my ex-business partner the other day, and all the technology that we previously, it's all totally obsolete now. It's only a few years
mm,
ago. The pace of change was really the thing that AI seems to have accelerated. And I was wondering about your feelings about trying to build a business when there's so many moving parts, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're only just over 2 years old, and clearly, yeah, I mean, the pace of change within 2 years has been a lot, but I did go into it also wanting to be involved in this sort of AI renaissance. That was like
Right.
part of what I wanted to do. So, when I was in government in my last job, I was involved in launching the UK's first international tech strategy, which to the in the heart of it was basically about how are we going to how do we think about geopolitics and international relations in with the advent of generative AI strongly, but also other things like quantum computing and other areas, biotechnology that was moving very rapidly. And I kind of concluded that it was, absolutely fascinating, but actually I wanted to work on it rather than necessarily be talking about it every day. So that was part of the driver for me was to sort of be in at this, at more or less the start of what is definitely a big technological revolution.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think you've summarized it well there. I mean, it's not going to go away, and I think the next few years is going to change a lot of things. Let me ask you about a couple of things. First of all, how would you say success from the past or from what you've done, and how is success, things that are going well, things that have worked, how has success influenced how you're thinking about building the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say when I left my job, I was very naive about, how quickly I could get something up and running. I really had no idea. All I had was a sort of idea and a gap that I wanted to fill, and a few ideas of the technology and the sort of ecosystem around air pollution. But I had absolutely no idea what it would take to get business properly off the ground. And I mean, it sounds a bit stupid, but I say it because actually it's actually not that, it's not such a bad position to be in, because you just take it day to day. Like, right, what am I going to do? What's going to make a difference here? And you're not sort of basing it on what you think might have worked in the past, because as you said, we are in a bit of a different world now. So yeah, a little bit of naivety going into it, and then I think the biggest, I suppose, sort of the roller coaster has been mainly around like getting investment. So to begin with, we were told, you're not going to raise investment. Don't be silly. Like number one, well, everyone's in a difficult macroeconomic situation, but you're trying to raise money for a company working on air pollution, which, according to the people who I'm sort of quoting, no one cares about. Um, Secondly, you and your co-founder are first-time founders, and that will scare people. And then, of course, you're trying to raise as a female CEO, and we all know how difficult that is. So I was
There's some
kind of told,
headwinds.
yeah, exactly. I was basically told, don't bother, you'll never manage. Of course, that, set me off on a train of proving everybody wrong. So we did manage to raise a decent chunk about a year ago. And I mean, absolutely transformative. I mean, apart from obviously the money, but I think just uh the fact that you've got people with you on the journey, some of whom have, been there before, or they have other portfolio companies, so they understand,
I mean, if you can
the,
get
the
good people on board, it
challenges.
really helps, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the mental shift when we got our first investor on board, thinking, we're not alone. It was somebody, we'd never met. There was no personal connection whatsoever, but they could see what we were doing, and they thought, we were a decent bet. So that was like absolutely,
A big boost, I would have thought.
that was a huge boost. But we're raising money now. It's very difficult. Even with the track record that we've now got under our belt, I feel it's almost more difficult than the first time round. And the macroeconomics aren't helping. But yeah, it's a very difficult process going through all of that. And then at the same time, obviously, getting the business sort of properly off the ground. And I think we've done really well in getting the traction through our mobile app, and we've got, users in 90 countries. We've
Wow,
got
that's
four and a half
extraordinary.
thousand people using AirTrack around the world. So overall, that's been a fantastic story. But we've always wanted to have a B2B angle as well, because that's the thing that's really going to get you scale. And it just takes such a long time. And, startups don't necessarily have a long time
I
before,
mean, every
the lights go
entrepreneur,
out.
every entrepreneur I've ever spoken to would say that it never goes faster. You can never get
Yeah,
stuff done fast enough. They always want
no.
to go. I mean, I'm true of that. Always wanted to go a bit faster, but it never. It's like having a baby. It takes 9 months. Just
Yeah,
good.
exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, so like our London Marathon contract that we got recently to do air pollution data at the marathon, that's sort of, yeah, exactly, probably just under a year in the making. And with a gap where we thought, oh, maybe it's never going to happen, and then suddenly it picks up again, and then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
we're there on the start line, kind of thing. So
It must be
you,
exciting though to know that's in the
yeah,
pipe.
yeah,
Let
yeah,
me
it's
ask you
brilliant.
about let me ask you about the flip side. I mean, in what way has failure influenced how you're building the business?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think just in a sort of normal kind of professional view on the world, you don't want to fail, and then once you get investors in, you don't want to fail them, and once you have users, you don't want to fail them.
And how does that make you feel about
And
making mistakes? Because I
yeah,
mean, there are two types of people on the planet: people that make mistakes and people that pretend they don't. I mean,
mm,
entrepreneurs are pretty good about being open about getting things wrong because they get them. People get stuff wrong all the time. I mean, I mean, how do you, given what you've just said about not wanting to fail, I mean, how
mm,
does that make you feel about the fact that mistakes happen and that sometimes they're yours?
mm. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's this mistakes of commission and mistakes of omission, if that's the
Yeah,
right phrase.
yeah.
And I mean, I probably am a bit on the side of like, let's be sure before we take this step, or let's, I don't know, make sure if we're putting ourselves open to a cybersecurity risk, let's not go down that, for instance, thinking about your upcoming event. But I think I've also got pretty comfortable with the like shit, what's the phrase? If you're happy with your product when you ship it, then you've shipped it too late, basically. So every time we've done a product launch of different descriptions, we know it's not perfect for sure. We just, it's just important to keep the momentum, get it out there, get user feedback, help us to figure out our next step. So I'm quite comfortable with all of that. Which mistakes am I? Yeah, definitely cybersecurity type mistakes. Not happy with that, but I think for good reason, because that
Yeah,
could
lots of people
whole
worried about
pull
that, to
down
be
the whole
honest.
thing.
Yeah.
So some things that you don't compromise on. Um, I guess. I mean, with my government background, like how you communicate as well.
Yeah.
I am quite pernickety about how we're communicating. But also, like whenever you talk about air pollution, the biggest thing that everyone comes back to is a lack of awareness. So I'm also like, we just have to communicate in every possible way, in every possible forum. So I'm also quite, up for being out there. And if we occasionally say the wrong thing, then,
I
so
mean, just
be
to
it.
pick up that point, I mean, let's say you do say the wrong thing. I mean, for instance, I mean, how do you make sure the business, not just you, but the business learns from mistakes? I mean, I'm always interested in how businesses work out what they're doing right and what they're not doing right, but then also
Mm,
how they learn from that. So that I mean, I try not to make mistakes more than once. I mean, I wish I'd achieved that, but how do you, as the CEO, I mean, how do you make sure the business learns from those mistakes? Because it is a bit more of a complicated process.
mm. Yeah, I mean, maybe sort of not calling them mistakes in the first place. So, like getting a product out there that we know is unfinished, and we know there's bits of it people
Mm.
aren't going to like. We have to love that. It's not, it's
Yeah,
not a
yeah, yeah.
mistake as such. We have to be just, really happy when we get that email that says, I've tried your product and I don't like this and this annoys me and whatever. That the mindset should be that that's the best email you've ever received, rather than a stab through the heart of your beautiful baby that you've launched.
Yeah.
I mean, we do just before this call, I just came off a team call that we do every month where we look at our key data, that we've decided which bits of the massive amount of data that you could be looking at, are we going to track on a monthly basis and use it to try and make decisions. It's always quite challenging because it's the why of what's under the data that is the hardest thing to get to. And is it because you're tracking it in a slightly different way than you were last month, or you've changed the platform you use because the old platform wasn't going to be suitable from a cybersecurity perspective. So now you've got a new platform, but they're tracking it slightly differently. And so we go around a few houses like that. But it has showed us a few things that we just wouldn't have spotted at all. So like when we did our last big product launch in April, we have this thing where we push out some personalized text out to people's Strava feeds where they've integrated with us. And that is one of our biggest channels of acquisition and user engagement and so on through Strava, as you can imagine, because it's 130 million users and whatever. And we realized that when we changed the text slightly for the launch, we'd dropped the URL below the bit where people could actually read, see things, and therefore, surprise, surprise, our click rate had gone down very substantially. We were
Yeah.
like, that's strange because we've just done a big launch, which apparently was successful, but we'd
Yeah.
just totally missed our biggest channel, basically. So looked at the data, changed it, looked at the data again, and I think no one, like, there was no blame or anything around any of that. Like everyone was managing a million things at once, so it's
Yeah.
just
Things just. Yeah.
catch it and deal with it,
Yeah.
basically.
I mean, the thing I
Yeah.
like about entrepreneurs is they're generally pretty quick. They're pretty open about making mistakes, and they're pretty quick to fix them. I mean, unlike sometimes people in government, where they never admit they've ever done anything wrong until they have to.
Mm.
Entrepreneurs are pretty upfront about that because if you don't get it fixed, you can't move on. Most people want to fix the problem and move on. So I think that's one of the things that makes working with entrepreneurs and working in business is it makes it most interesting because it's one ongoing series of problems to be solved, really. Which if you're of that mindset, I think it's always quite an interesting place. But let me ask you about how you feel about being the CEO of what is quite a fast-growing business. I mean, has the business, as it were, ever grown beyond your expertise so far? I mean, has it gone beyond, and you thought, oh, maybe I'm out of my depth here. Have you had any of that, been in that situation at all?
I mean, I'm not a software engineer, so I right from the start, like, I trust the CTO. And the modeling that we're doing around air pollution, I understand it, like, the sort of building blocks of what we're doing, but I don't know in and out. That's my co-founder's job, and he's the chief scientific officer with a PhD in air pollution. So I don't expect to know everything. And I mean, to be honest, even the bits that do end up on my desk and no one else's, like dealing with companies' house returns, I'm also not an expert in any of that, but I have to figure it out quite quickly, because otherwise, we'll be in trouble. So yeah, so it's very much like who understanding things to the extent that you need to be able to do your job, to provide a little bit of challenge, to see where things, one bit of the business is doing something that doesn't match to somebody else. And, if you didn't understand both of those things to a sufficient extent, you'd never notice that there was a gap or a misalignment. So yeah, I'm kind of, and again, this is probably back to my government job. The spans of control in government, obviously I wasn't a CEO, but the spans of control are enormous. And you can't expect to know everything about what everyone's doing. That would just lead to madness. So yeah, so you get to the level of expertise that you think is sufficient to
Although we expect
manage
Keir
what you've
Starmer
got.
to know everything about what's going on in government.
Well,
Any senior person, we want
exactly.
them to know every single detail. But I take your point.
But
It's
I mean,
impossible.
it's partly expertise, but also, I mean, with that sort of thing in mind, it's also like processes of, when do you get the person X to report to you on their progress on something? You don't necessarily need to know all the steps that they took to get from point A to point B, but you need to have some accountability and whatever. So yeah, I mean, there's different things you bring together.
Yeah, I mean, Margaret Thatcher famously said trust but verify. I think she was referring to nuclear disarmament, actually, but trust but verify has always struck me as quite a useful way of thinking about it. And let me ask you about what you've learnt from the experience. I mean, as you've sort of developed as a CEO and as the business has developed, I mean, has your definition of good decision making changed?
Um, so I think. uh, I mean, it's interesting. You kind of got like two lines going like this is, I mean, this is just describing any kind of process really, but like at the beginning, there was very little certainty about anything, but
Yeah.
also there were endless opportunities. So the problem was more, um, out of 1,000 things we could do, none of which we really know much about, in terms of whether they'll work or whether people care or whatever, you kind of need to go that way. And then now the amount of information we're holding in our heads or we're holding in CRM processes or we're holding in our email inbox or whatever about this type of company is interested in this type of user is interested in that. You've got a vast amount of detail, and it does come. And again, this is where AI can be helpful because there's just so much stuff there that you could not know, not find it very hard to spot the patterns as a human being to spot the patterns in that and work out what that means for you for just what do we do next. So so I'd say we have a lot more like sort of overall, so like I was saying to you at the beginning, we had these kind of three personas in terms of kind of users of who we thought we would care about our product. We've still got those in the background, but we're now, as a result of all the sort of data in broad terms that we've collected, we're very much going for the urban athlete because we think that's what's landing the most. So yeah, so I guess like your strategy just gets more sort of realism and evidence behind it as you go along, but doesn't make it easier, I don't
No, in fact, it
think.
gets harder, I think, as the business grows.
Yeah.
The complexity gets worse, and the difficulties, the messy stuff, the awkward stuff that you have to deal with gets worse. The bigger it gets, the more problematic it is, I think. Um, which is partly what makes it more interesting, though. And that's the other side to it. So what you're saying is you started off a little bit naive, and now you're a bit more streetwise. What does that say about you as a leader, would you say?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think I've always been a fairly like realistic kind of person,
Uh,
and one thing, I do need to check myself often that like, yeah, but what about the long-term vision and what about the changing the world? Why don't you talk about those things? So yeah, I mean, I don't think I've kind of shifted on that very much. It's more being confirmed that you need a big vision, but you also need to figure out the practical steps that you're going to take to get there. And I try and do my best to move between the two of them. Um, yeah, what else? I mean, I would say the biggest thing that has been difficult for me coming out of a government job is, and this may be true to some extent of people coming out of kind of corporate roles, is this focus within startups of the founder story and why you, and this sort of very like personalized trying to concoct a kind of story that you're the only possible person in the world who could make this crazy thing, happen, and why everyone should go with you, which did not sit well with me at all coming out of
But what
government
and why do
because,
you say that? That's because a lot of people are very happy to say why they're the only
yeah.
person that should be given this dollop of cash by investors. I mean, why did that not sit comfortably with you? I mean, I actually understand what you're saying. Why
Mm.
is that the case, would you say?
Oh, I think it's like I had 20 years in government where you're filling a role, you're not, necessarily being an individual. And of course, you have some decision-making powers, but it's all mediated within a massive system. When you're going out to speak publicly, it's, the lines to take and
Yeah.
the lines not to take. You're talking within a context, and you're sort of doing the right thing because you can't have government going out and
But now
saying all
you've got
sorts of
more
different
freedom, haven't
things.
you? I mean,
But
you've got more
yeah.
freedom now in your role. I mean, is that not a good thing to have a bit more
Yeah,
freedom?
no, I mean, I was going to say definitely got more comfortable with it, but it's like the biggest thing that I found awkward. So, you know, team building, decision making, dealing with conflict, resilience, all those things that are about building a company, I would say equally relate to my sort of previous life in government. But this is the one thing that like is just completely different. So, going out as Louise Thomas, people want to hear from Louise Thomas rather than the head of the international tech department, as I was. So that's the biggest thing to get comfortable with for me personally.
Yeah, I get that. And if you were starting from scratch, is there anything you'd do differently?
Um, what would I do differently? I mean, going back to the sort of naivety point, I sometimes say it's a bit like childbirth. Like if people told you all the horrific
You wouldn't
stuff
do
that
it.
was, then no one would go there, and then that would be the end of the human race.
Yeah.
So there is some. I mean, I'm not saying it's right really, but there is something to be said for a little bit of naivety and just try it out anyway. But if I was going in and now I know kind of thing how hard it was. Uh, I mean, people do say, do the thing. If you're going to build a company, build it in the thing that you really care about, the thing that's going to get you up every morning. And that is out of all the different pieces of advice, because you get one bit of advice that takes you that way, another bit of advice that takes you the other way. That is the one core that, completely agree, and I tell other people the same thing. Um, but there is also something to be said for, I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who go and build a company not because they particularly care, but because they've just spotted a massive market opportunity and, fair play,
Maybe they just care
So
about money.
build it on, yeah, what you think is gonna, and you've got the right industry contacts and you've got the right whatever just to sort of land it quickly and painlessly and whatever. There's something to be said for that. I'm not sure, I don't think I would ever do that, but if that's what people are in it for, then there's definitely something to be said for, like, for instance, we sometimes find ourselves on kind of accelerator type or programs or workshops and things like that, which is basically like corporates, Samsung or whoever saying, I've got this problem, I want a startup to solve this problem. you know and actually it would be a very wise thing to just go and like just solve a problem for a massive corporate. It would certainly make it, some of this stuff a little bit
I mean, we
easier.
did that with one of our businesses, actually, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it's quite a smart move. So what you're saying is, if you were to give a piece of advice to a rookie CEO, you would say, find something to work on that you care about. Is that right?
Well, I do say that. I do say that to people, but I would also say that part of that is because, you're going to have to put up with not earning any money for a long time. You're going to have to put up with constant uncertainty about whether anyone else
Mm.
cares. Just because you care doesn't mean anyone else cares. And so do that if you're in the position where, you can take a few knocks. You think you've got resilience both sort of personally, but also a level of financial resilience that can put up with that. So, it's sort of the right advice, but it also, it has to work for somebody like in their circumstances,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
it's
people
not,
need to understand it's a tough gig. Building a business is
yeah,
a
and
tough gig, isn't it?
it's definitely not
Louise,
easy.
thank you for sharing that story. I mean, I think I mean it's really interesting what you're doing, and I think what I think is good about it is that if it will have a profound effect, I'm sure, on people. So I mean, I really appreciate you making the time to come and talk to us about it. I mean, a great story. I
Yeah,
think probably a great business in the long run. Was my
yeah,
feeling about
yeah,
it,
I
and
think
it will
so.
have a really
Yeah.
positive effect on people. So it seems to me it'd be all pretty good all round, actually. So well done on that, and good luck going forward. And thanks for making time to come and talk to us about it.
Yeah, fantastic. Really good to talk. A bit of therapy for the CEO as well to yeah, spend an hour just just talking about what I do. It's yeah, a great relief on a Tuesday morning. So very good to see you, Paul.
Yeah, likewise. No, I
All
really
right.
really appreciate you making time. All right, I'll see you soon.
Cool. Thanks very much.